The canine dog suddenly broke its leash and jumped onto the body of its owner, shocking everyone at the funeral. And then everyone thought that the dog imagined its owner was sleeping. But whether everyone's thoughts were correct, or the dog was telling a conspiracy that everyone did not know, that will be revealed in a few minutes, and before knowing the outcome of the story. Please like and subscribe to the channel, so as not to miss the next story. The air inside the Redmond Chapel hung thick with grief, a suffocating stillness broken only by the rustle of black suits and the occasional stifled sob. We were all there to say goodbye to Colonel Carter Calloway, a war hero, a damn fine boss, and the man who'd shaped my life in the Army more than anyone else. I stood close behind, my old uniform loose, but it was hard to breathe inside my chest. Hard to breathe because the dark oak coffin held my comrade and lifelong boss Carter, who had survived hell, explosions in Afghanistan and ambushes in Iraq, but now lay in coffin with the verdict. He had sleep apnea. That didn't sit well with me, not at all. But then the sound of someone crying brought my thoughts back to the present. It was the sobbing of his sister, Margaret, who sat in the front with her brown hair hanging down in a tangle, while she was clutching a wet handkerchief as if it were her lifeline. And in contrast to that broken image was his wife, Linda, who had just arrived late with her eyes glancing around the room before approaching the coffin. But she barely looked at the coffin, just tapping away on her phone screen even as the pastor continued speaking. It made me ache, because I had worked under Carter for years, and that disrespectful attitude from her made me uncomfortable and confused. What was she hiding behind that distracted look? Maybe no one knew except Jake. Jake, Carter's old K9 partner, pacing at the chapel entrance. That German shepherd had been through the trenches with us. Alert, fearless, always on point. Now he was a mess. Chest heaving, eyes darting, growling low at the coffin like it was a threat. Linda snapped, "Get that damn dog out of here," her voice cutting through the quiet like a blade. An officer grabbed Jake's leash, but the dog wasn't having it. With one sharp yank, he broke free, nails clicking hard against the polished floor as he bolted down the aisle. Before anyone could blink, Jake was on top of the coffin, clawing at the silk lining like a mad animal with a gasp, his breathing echoing across the pews. Jack's actions angered Linda, with her face contorting, but I saw something else in Jake's frenzy, something I'd seen before on the battlefield. This wasn't just grief. That dog was warning us, same as he'd done when he'd sniffed out IEDs or barked us out of an ambush. He'd saved my life once, Carter's too. I couldn't shake the feeling he was trying to tell us something now. But now I need to get Jake out of the coffin before Linda can throw him in the animal shelter. After everyone cleared out, including Linda, who bolted without a word, I stayed behind. That night, Jake and I were alone with the coffin, and I couldn't leave my comrade here alone, with doubt gnawing at my gut. Memories hit me hard. Carter showing me the ropes my first week in uniform, dragging me out of a firefight in Kabul, Jake's barks echoing through the chaos. If it weren't for that dog, we'd both be dead. Now here I was, staring at his coffin, and like me, Jake's ears remained still as his eyes locked on that box. Something was wrong. Linda's attitude, Jake's panic. It all formed a puzzle I had yet to solve. And now Jake's growls echoed throughout the chapel. But what danger was he warning us about that Linda seemed so desperate to avoid? The Redmond Chapel turned into a crypt after midnight, the kind of quiet that presses on your chest until you can't breathe right. Shadows stretched long and jagged across the pews, swallowing the faint glow from a flickering candle near the altar. I sat stiff in a hard wooden seat, my old army jacket pulled tight against the chill. Jake paced beside me, his nails clicking soft but steady on the polished floor. His ears stayed perked, eyes locked on Carter's coffin like it might spring to life. I couldn't blame him. After his stunt at the funeral, leaping onto that oak box like it was hiding a live grenade, I couldn't shake the itch in my gut. Something was wrong, dead wrong. Then it happened. A shadow moved, quick, deliberate, slipping through the side door like a ghost. Jake's head snapped up, a growl tearing from his throat, low and mean. I bolted upright, hand brushing the knife tucked in my belt. "Who's there?" My voice bounced off the walls, sharp as a gunshot. The figure froze, then stepped into the dim candlelight. Tall guy, wiry build, skin tanned like he just rolled in from California. Easy, man, he said, hands raised. My name is Brock, an old friend of Carter's from the West, and I heard he passed away, so I came to pay my respects. But Jake wasn't buying it. His hackles spiked, lips curling back, teeth flashing as he snarled at Brock like he'd seen the devil himself. I squinted hard. Was this Jake protecting Carter's body? Or had he crossed paths with this guy before? Either way, my skin crawled. I opened my mouth to press him. Where'd he know Carter from? Why show up now? But before I could, a sound cut me off. A thud. Dull, heavy, unmistakable. It came from the coffin. My heart slammed into my ribs. Jake lost it. Snapped his leash clean in two. Lunged at the box, claws raking the wood like he could claw Carter back to life. Jake! I yelled, voice cracking, but he didn't hear me. His paws scraped frantic, splinters flying, a desperate whine mixing with his growls. I stumbled over, boots thumping loud in the silence, hands shaking as I grabbed the coffin's edge. The wood felt cold, too cold, under my fingers. What the hell was that noise? A trick of the night? A loose board? Or something someone inside? I spun around to demand answers from Brock, but the bastard was gone. Vanished. No creak of the door, no echo of footsteps. Just an empty doorway and the rustle of wind sneaking through the crack. My breath hitched. I scanned the shadows, knife half drawn. But nothing. Just me, Jake, and that damn thud stuck in my head like a bad song. Jake kept at it, pawing the coffin, his growls softening into something mournful, almost pleading. I sank back into the pew, wiping sweat from my brow. Sleep was off the table now. That sound, it wasn't my imagination. And Brock, he didn't slink off like that for no reason. Jake's instincts were screaming, and I'd learned the hard way to trust them. Back in Kabul, his nose had caught a buried IED. Saved my squad. Saved Carter. If he was freaking now, I wasn't ignoring it. Dawn crept in slow, gray light spilling through the stained glass windows, painting the chapel floor in muted reds and blues. I hadn't moved, hadn't slept, just sat there, staring at that coffin. Jake curled at my feet, still watchful. Linda showed up early, heels clicking as she strode in, phone still glued to her hand. I caught her outside before the mourners trickled back, voice low and tight. Last night, someone slipped in, called himself Brock, said he knew Carter. Jake went nuts, growled like he'd ripped the guy apart. Then I heard a thud from the coffin. She laughed, a brittle, cutting sound that didn't reach her eyes. You're losing it, soldier. Too many late nights, huh? Seeing ghosts. But her gaze flicked away too fast, fingers tightening on that phone. Nervous. I stepped closer. Funny thing, I saw him with you today, whispering. What's that about? She waved a hand, dismissive. Nobody. You're paranoid. Drop it. Her voice was ice, but I caught the tremble. She was lying. I could smell it. Later, Dr. Natalie Miller rolled in, coroner's badge glinting on her coat, eyes sharp behind her glasses. She'd come to pay respects, but she pulled me aside near the back pews, voice hushed. Something's off with Carter's report. Sleep apnea. For a guy like him? No autopsy either. That's sloppy. Doesn't add up for a colonel with his record. I nodded slow, her words sinking in like lead. She wasn't wrong. 3 days back, I'd met Carter at Rusty's Diner, a dive joint off the highway. He'd been knocking back whiskeys. More than usual, his tie loose, eyes tired. Over the clink of glasses. He'd let it slip, voice slurring but dead serious. Linda's bleeding me dry, man. Lawyers drafting divorce papers. She's gonna fight dirty, I know it. He'd laughed, bitter, then downed another shot. Healthy? Sure. Stressed? Hell yeah. But apnea killing him? No chance. I leaned against the pew, Miller's words mixing with Carter's whiskey-soaked confession. Jake's growls. Brock's vanishing act. Linda's dodge. My head spun, piecing it together. Carter wasn't some old vet who'd just stopped breathing. Not with Jake clawing like that. Not with a stranger creeping in at midnight. Not with Linda acting like she had a secret worth killing for. I glanced at the coffin, its polished surface mocking me. Sleep wasn't coming tonight either. I had to know. A strange sound came from a coffin. But why did Brock vanish? And what was Linda hiding from us all? I leaned against the pew, Mitchell's words mixing with Carter's whiskey-soaked confession. Jake's growls. Brock's vanishing act. Linda's dodge. My head spun, piecing it together. Carter wasn't some old vet who'd just stopped breathing. Not with Jake clawing like that. Not with a stranger creeping in at midnight. Not with Linda acting like she had a secret worth killing for. I glanced at the coffin, its polished surface mocking me. Sleep wasn't coming tonight either. I had to know. A strange sound came from the coffin, but why did Brock vanish? And what was Linda hiding from us all? By 10 a.m., the chapel was packed with people coming to say their final goodbyes to Carter, with mournful murmurs and gasps filling the air. I stood near Carter's coffin, and Jake was beside me. His growl was quieter now, but his eyes were still sharp. Linda hovered nearby, phone in hand, her heels tapping an impatient rhythm on the floor. I'd had enough. Brock's midnight vanishing act, that thud from the coffin, her dodgy answers, it all screamed trouble. I turned to her, voice low but hard as steel. We need to open it, Linda. Now. Her head snapped up, eyes narrowing. What? No way. That's insane. She clutched her phone like a shield, but I didn't back down. Jake's telling us something. I trust him. You should too. She laughed, a shrill, nervous bark. You're out of your mind. It's done. He's gone. I wasn't buying it. Not after last night. I caught Dr. Mitchell's eye across the room. She nodded, subtle but firm. She'd been digging too, questioning the apnea story. I leaned in closer to Linda. Brock was here. You know him. And something moved in there. Her face went pale, lips twitching, but she doubled down. You're delusional. Leave it alone. The crowd started murmuring, heads turning. I didn't care. I spotted Captain Hayes from the Defense Department in his dress blues. He'd known Carter forever. Sir, I called, stepping forward. We've got reason to suspect foul play. I need your authority to open this coffin. Hayes frowned, glanced at Linda, then at Jake, still rigid by the box. You sure about this, son? I nodded. Dead sure. He sighed, then waved a hand. Do it. Linda's protest died fast when Hayes glared her down. The funeral director fumbled with the latches, hands shaky, the crowd holding its breath. Jake tensed, ears up, tail stiff. The lid creaked open, and there he was, Carter, pale and still in his uniform, medals gleaming under the chapel lights. For a split second, it looked like he was just sleeping. Then Mitchell pushed through, her fingers pressing his neck. Time stretched, 5 seconds, 10. Her eyes widened. Holy hell, there's a pulse. Weak, but it's there. The room exploded. Gasps, cries, chairs scraping as people surged forward. Linda stumbled back, not sobbing. Her face twisted with something darker. Disappointment? Fear? I couldn't tell, but it wasn't grief. Call an ambulance. I barked, shoving through the chaos to Mitchell's side. She was already checking him, calm but fast. Bruises here on his neck, at his knee. Not natural. She pointed to faint purple marks, hidden under his collar and pant leg. My stomach dropped. Poison. She nodded grimly. Looks like a paralytic, mimics death. Someone screwed up the dose. I spun toward Linda, but she was edging toward the door, phone slipping from her hand. Stop her, I yelled. An officer grabbed her arm. She fought wild-eyed, but he held firm. Brock was nowhere in sight. Of course. Slippery bastard. The sirens wailed closer, cutting through the stunned chatter. Paramedics burst in, gurney rattling, oxygen mask ready. They lifted Carter out. His chest barely moved, but it moved. Alive. Jake barked, sharp and triumphant, tail whipping as he followed the stretcher. I ran alongside, shouting orders. Secure the chapel, crime scene now. Nobody leaves. The medics strapped Carter in, monitors beeping faint but steady. BP's crashing. One said, voice tight. We've got minutes. They wheeled him out, Jake right on their heels, refusing to leave his side. That dog's loyalty. Ironclad. Always had been. We hit Redmond Hospital fast, tires screeching into the ER bay. Docs swarmed Carter, barking stats, pulse thready, oxygen low. I paced the sterile waiting room, Jake beside me, his fur brushing my leg. Linda got dragged by MPs, cuffed and silent, her cool mask cracking. I glared through the glass as they hauled her to a holding room. What the hell was she playing at? Mitchell slipped in, clipboard in hand. Preliminary talk screens back. It's a rare synthetic, slows everything down, fakes death. He's lucky to be breathing. I clenched my fists. Lucky. Someone tried to bury him alive. She nodded, eyes dark. Yeah, and they almost got away with it. Jake whined, nudging my hand, his gaze fixed on the ICU doors where they'd taken Carter. I crouched, scratching his ears. You knew, didn't you, boy? Saved him again. Memories hit. Jake's nose catching a trap in '03. His barks pulling us from a burning Humvee. He never quit on us. Never would. But Linda's face stuck with me. Those eyes, cold and cornered. And Brock, gone like a ghost. This wasn't over. Someone wanted Carter dead, bad enough to risk it all. I stood jaw tight, watching the medics wheel equipment past. Linda's mask slipped, revealing her fear. But who was the shadow pulling her strings? And how close were they to finishing the job? The hospital hummed with chaos, beeping monitors, rushing footsteps, antiseptic stinging my nose. Carter was in the ICU, hooked to tubes and wires, his chest rising slow under a thin sheet. Jake sat at my feet, ears twitching, eyes locked on the glass doors where they'd taken his partner. I paced, boots scuffing the tile, my mind racing. Linda was down the hall, cuffed in a holding room, her icy mask shattered. MPs stood guard, their faces blank, but I could feel her glare through the walls. Dr. Levine, the attending doc, pushed through the double doors, clipboard in hand. Colonel Calloway's been poisoned, he said, voice clipped. Synthetic compound, rare as hell. Slows the heart, mimics death. Another hour in that coffin, he'd be gone for good. I clenched my fists. Brain damage. He shrugged, grim. Too early. We're pumping counteragents, but it's a coin toss. I stormed to the holding room, shoving past a guard. Linda sat there, wrists bound, staring at the table like it owed her answers. Why? I snapped, slamming a hand on the metal. She flinched but didn't look up. You don't get it, she muttered. He was leaving me, divorce, the farm, everything. Brock promised we'd split it all. I leaned in, voice low. So you dosed his coffee for 2 weeks? Buried him alive. Her head jerked up, eyes blazing. It wasn't supposed to kill him. Just slow him down, make him quit. Brock said. She stopped, lips trembling. Brock said what? I pressed. She clammed up, but the pieces clicked. Money. Greed. Betrayal. Back in the ICU, Carter stirred. His eyes fluttered open, foggy but alive, locking on me. Jake whined, tail thumping, pressing against the glass. Pocket, Carter rasped, voice barely a whisper. Uniform pocket. I bolted to the evidence locker where they'd stashed his dress blues from the coffin. My fingers tore at the lining. There, a micro SD card, small as a dime. I plugged it into a hospital laptop, breath held. Files loaded, bank records, photos, audio clips. Linda and Brock plotting, her voice cold and clear. 300 acres, the insurance. Millions if he's gone. Brock's reply. Kay's got the poison. We just deliver. My blood ran cold. Kay, a puppet master behind the curtain. The cops dragged Linda out, her heels scraping as she screamed denials. Brock got nabbed an hour later at a gas station, trying to skip town. In interrogation, he cracked fast, sweat beading on his tan forehead. It was Kay's idea, he blurted. I owed him gambling debts, big ones. He paid in Bitcoin, called the shots through encrypted chats. Said kill Carter, split the cash with Linda. I leaned across the table, voice hard. Who's Kay? Brock shook his head wild-eyed. Never met him. Just a voice, a ghost. Runs everything. I cursed under my breath. A shadow player, untouchable. For now. Days bled into weeks. Carter fought back, slow, stubborn, a soldier through and through. Physical therapy started, his cane tapping as he relearned steps. Docs called it a miracle, but his hands shook, and his words slurred some days. Poison left scars, maybe forever. Me. I wasn't so lucky. The gunshot I'd taken at the hospital, Brock's last-ditch ambush, tore through my side, nicked my kidney. Docs patched me up, but the damage stuck. Dialysis loomed in my future, a quiet price for standing by Carter. I didn't regret it. Not for a second. Jake bounced back fastest, that damn dog. Ribs healed. Fur regrew. He was trotting again in a month, tail high like nothing happened. The Defense Department threw a ceremony, medals for me, Carter, even a shiny one for Jake, pinned to a custom harness. Hayes handed me mine, his grip firm. "You're a hell of a soldier," he said. "Calloway's recommending you for Border Chief, Mexico line." His word still carries weight. I blinked, caught off guard. Carter, propped in a chair, grinned weak but real. "You've earned it, kid. Rebuild something clean down there." I nodded, throat tight. After all the rot we'd waded through, it felt like a lifeline. Linda and Brock faced trial fast, conspiracy, attempted murder, the works. She took a plea, sobbing in court, claiming coercion. 15 years. Brock got 20, no deals, no mercy. The farm went to Margaret, Carter's sister, who'd stood by him quiet and steady. Evidence from the SD card nailed them, bank transfers, coded messages, photos of Linda slipping powder into Carter's mug. But Kay, nothing. No face, no name, just whispers in the dark. Brock swore he'd never met the guy, just followed orders through a screen. It gnawed at me. A loose end, a ghost still out there. Carter settled at the farm post-retirement, 300 acres of green stretching under a wide sky. Jake stayed with him, chasing rabbits, sleeping by the porch. I visited when I could, boots crunching gravel as I hauled groceries, or just sat with them under the stars. One night, Carter handed me a beer, his grip shaky, but eyes clear. "Jake knew," he said, voice rough. "Always did. Saved us more times than I can count." I nodded, scratching Jake's ears. "He's a damn hero." Carter chuckled, soft. "We all are in our way." Weeks later, I was packing for the border gig, new uniform, new start, when Carter called. His voice was tense, a tone I hadn't heard since Kabul. "Got a message," he said. "From Kay." My gut dropped. What did it say? He read it slow. "Trouble's not over if you keep that dog." I froze, beer halfway to my mouth. "A threat?" Carter grunted. "Sounds like it. Jake's still a target, or maybe me." I set the bottle down hard. "He's not getting near you. Either of you." Carter paused, then sighed. "Watch your back down there, kid. Kay's got reach." I hung up, staring at the wall. Linda was locked up. Brock too. But Kay, this faceless bastard, was still pulling strings, a shadow we couldn't pin. Carter's farm, Jake's safety, my new post. It all felt fragile now, like a house of cards waiting for a gust. I grabbed my gear, jaw tight. We'd beaten death once, dug Carter out of a coffin, exposed the rot. But this wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Jake's loyalty, Carter's grit, my scars, they'd carried us this far. They'd have to carry us further. The sun dipped low as I drove south, border dust already in my mind. Carter and Jake would hold the line at home. Me, I'd hunt this ghost, Kay, whoever he was. Justice had risen, yeah, but shadows lingered, deep and dark. Linda's mask fell and Brock broke, but Kay's chilling threat echoed therefore. Could Carter and Jake ever escape the shadow, still hunting them?